To her, it's all a game by Jay Wilburn. Wade Sedley. All right, Kedman, I'm sorry, Jay. I need to go to sleep. Good to see you. Good to see you too, man. And of course, you are several hours ahead of me, so get yourself to bed and have a good day tomorrow. Look forward to catching you again. To Her It's All a Game by Jay Wilburn. Wade Sedley rocked from one foot to the other in his family's kitchen. He was running low on excuses for why he didn't want to leave the house. It was his older sister, 7 years his elder and driving herself places, who ratted him out. She said it without looking up from her phone as she finished her breakfast. It's that Mackenzie girl he's afraid of. Oh, thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Thank you for the follow, Slow Feral. That was really nice of you. Raids are always helpful. Thanks for dropping in. I hope you enjoy this story. She said it without looking up from her phone as she finished her breakfast. It's that Mackenzie girl he's afraid of. Both his parents looked to Willa, who did not return their gaze, and then to Wade, who looked away at the linoleum floor. Mackenzie Marlindale? Mom asked. How can you possibly be afraid of her? He couldn't tell them. They wouldn't believe him anyway, and there was no telling what she might do if he did tell. She likes him, Willa said. Shut up, Wade yelled. Hey, take it easy, Dad ordered. He had gotten bored and started checking email on his phone as well. Mom thought she'd close the matter. She's a good girl from a good family. Just go on out and have fun today. Wade wasn't sure about Mackenzie's family, but he was sure about her, and that girl was anything but good. I don't want to. Get out of the house and play, Dad ordered. Did you write this all on stream today? This one I wrote on stream a couple days ago. The story before this one I wrote on stream yesterday, and then earlier I wrote a new story. So every stream I usually do 3 blocks. I do a writing block where I just take a title and write a story from scratch. The first edit of the story is the next day, and then I do a reading. So I usually have 3 stories each day. And this is the reading blocks. One I've been working on a little bit. I always do an edit off screen too, to try and catch anything I didn't get on the fly. So hopefully this one is error free, but I tend to find typos every time I read something. All right. Why does Willa not have to go play? I'm going to work. No more arguing. And that was the end of it. Wade hoped it wasn't the end of him. He slinked out through the side door and endeavored to keep the screen door's hinges from making too much noise. The birds were super loud today. It was getting to be winter. Fair. That sounds like a pretty good process for getting stuff done. I like it for getting the stories done. I also like it for making a stream last. Like earlier in 2021, I did a stream each day for a month. Last year it was in May. This year I'm going to do a stream every day in March, and just wrote a new short story every day. And I found that I got more interaction once I got toward that second hour. And so I was trying to figure out how do you do that with writing, because unless I'm doing a novel, there's really no way I was going to be writing a story for 2 or 3 hours unless it's 10,000 words. So I kind of figured out that process. If I kind of did the whole process on, the writing, the editing, and then a reading with 3 different stories, then I kind of stretched it out. Also, occasionally I'll do an article too, something that I've written or something that someone else has written, and just kind of look it over and discuss it. And sometimes that's a 4th block. Thank you for the follow, Oracle. I appreciate it. So that'll get me up to about the 2 or 3 hour mark, which I found is a little more successful for me than just popping on and off for 30 minutes or whatever it is. So that's usually what I do. I haven't done the 4th block in a while, but I got some articles coming up that I kind of want to look at. So we may have a 4th block in one of the future streams. All right. It was getting to be winter. They should all have gone further south, he thought, even though today it was a bit warmer for this time of year. But what did he really know about birds? He guessed they were robins, but none of them held still long enough for him to see. At least their noise covered the squeaky screen door. Wade decided to make his way through the yards to try to slip from her attention. Then the birds went silent all at once. All that noise down to nothing in an instant. Sometimes at school, with all the noise in the cafeteria, kids would suddenly all pause at once. Then everyone got awkward and quiet. Usually people laughed and got back to talking again. He had never heard birds do that. Wade froze in place between yards. When none of the birds started laughing about the silence, he turned his head slowly, and there she was, 1 year older than him, but almost a head taller. Her hair was in long ponytails. A lot of the curly strands were escaping the ties, making her long curly hair appear unruly. Her bright eyes fixed upon him, and he felt sick and weak down his center. She smiled with perfectly straight and white teeth gleaming. Got you. Wade abandoned his stealth plan and ran headlong into the street and down the center. He didn't have to look to know she was right behind him. He looked anyway. Her feet barely touched the ground as she glided along behind him in her terrible, smooth motion. Upon meeting eyes with him again, she laughed high and shrill. He faced forward and put on speed that he knew would do little good. He passed her house where the blinds were always closed and the first intersection coming off Fitzwater Road. Both those turns were dead ends. Even if he couldn't outrun her, that was not the way to go. Wade allowed himself to believe that he might make the next street ahead of her before he could cut the corner to run down Pearldale Avenue. She took him by the hair and lifted him up into the air. More of that giggling cut painfully into his ears as his feet lifted further and further from the ground. Let me go, Mackenzie. Are you sure about that, stud? 2 cars passed each other on Pearldale several feet under him. He squirmed in her grasp, with his scalp burning from supporting all his weight, but he said nothing. They reached the top of a grand old tree high above the backyard, and one of the other houses. He had no idea which street it was on, as he had never traveled his neighborhood this high in the air. Mackenzie had lifted him onto rooftops before, and sometimes left him there, but never this. They continued to rise. Maybe this time she intended to drop him from far over the town. Stop, no higher, please, Mackenzie. She paused and then floated up and down a moment before she rested her weight on one of the thick branches overlooking the yard. She still held him aloft by his hair, his sneakers dangling in empty space. You're killing me. It hurts so bad. Please stop. Wade grabbed her wrist with both hands, but not to fight her, but to relieve a little of the pressure on his scalp. It didn't help much. I'd never, she said. Mackenzie shook him back and forth by his hair, adding to the pain as she winked. Then she pulled him in and gave him a light kiss on his sweaty forehead. You're my favorite little buddy. Before he could respond, the branch under her snapped. They twisted down through the stems and leaves of the tree. She lost her grip on him, and he prepared to break every bone in his body. He heard the falling branch impact one of the yards with a bass thump. Then the wind knocked right out of him as he tumbled down the slope of a roof, with the rough shingles tearing the skin on his elbows. In his daze, still trying to draw breath, Wade had a vague thought he needed to stop rolling before he fell off this roof. But he made his effort too late and only succeeded in pulling the gutter away from the edge of the house by a few inches before he fell again. Through the painful ends of the trimmed hedges, Wade cried out as he twisted through and finally rolled onto the dead winter grass of someone's front yard. He was covered in scrapes and felt bruised to his core. As he wavered up to his feet, he waited to see if anything on him came loose from that impossible fall. It was hard to tell with how much his scalp hurt and what a relief it was to no longer be dangling from his hair like that. Mackenzie, somewhere on the other side of the house, let out a string of curse words that Wade barely knew and would never repeat. That got him in motion, and he ran down Pearldale to try to escape. For a long while he thought she had given up on him for today. Falling from a treetop and off a roof at the same time hardly felt like getting away with anything, but his lungs and legs burned with his desperate sprint. But as his lungs and legs burned with his desperate sprint, he was thankful and wishful it might just be over for now. He was just about to turn onto Yorktown Lane, just as she landed in a superhero pose in the middle of the intersection. I have 2 justs in that sentence, which is terrible, but I'm not going to fix it right now. There wasn't much traffic, but cars honked and swerved around her, going all directions. She stood back up straight with a child's imitation of a graceful dancer. She held out her arms beside her in a ta-da motion. Another car swerved and the driver yelled out his window as he kept going. Wade thought the cars would obliterate if they actually hit her. and no telling what might have happened if the driver had dared to stop to confront her. Unlike Wade, there wasn't a scratch on her. That was fun. Are you ready for more? He wheeled about and ran in a limping, tired effort. She skated up beside him as her shoes scraped along the concrete while she glided with him, matching his speed. Why can't you leave me alone? Why? Because I don't want you hurting me anymore. So, please, Mackenzie. Please, Mackenzie, she mocked. He stopped running, and her weight settled back onto her feet again. You don't find this fun, Wade? You know I don't. He bent over and held his knees as his heart struggled to catch up. She ran her fingers through his hair and mussed it up gently in contrast to the pain she had caused flying up in the air holding him by it. You should appreciate me more. I'm a lot of fun, more than anyone you will ever know again. Sometimes Wade played the whiny victim to get her to let up. It didn't always work. At times, it made her angry and her torture of him grew more sadistic. It got a little dirty, gross. If on a particular day she'd really laid it on thick, he could occasionally defuse her by looking beat, showing defeat, being passive, submitting. Mackenzie's moods were hard to read, even after all this time. He didn't know a lot about birds, girls, or the dark workings of Mackenzie Marlandale's mind. Today he felt a deep bitterness that he could almost taste in the back of his throat, a flavor he associated with adult aspirin. Do your parents know about your powers? After a pause, she placed her hand under his chin and gently brought him back to standing straight up and looking into her bright, cruel eyes. You bratty little bratty brat. Did you tell on me? Who would I tell? Who would ever believe me? Her fingers tightened into a pinch of the skin under his jaw. Did you? No, I didn't. I was asking about your parents. Her grip eased a little, but only a little. They know what I want them to know. Like everyone else, they see what I want them to see. Wade cut his eyes at the street. Cars whizzed past. A middle-aged couple, maybe married, walked wide around him and Mackenzie, without looking up or breaking their conversation. Did none of them see? Could she hide her powers from all of them? That would explain a lot. He'd often thought that maybe she was a witch. Maybe her whole family was witches. He wondered if her powers would grow greater with time or slip away from her the way all adults stop believing in magic or monsters eventually, the way they stop seeing. Now, with her implying that she could control what others saw, including her own parents, he allowed himself to really contemplate for the first time that she might be something else, something other. He had never entertained the notion that she might not be a kid at all. She might not really be human. What would that mean for him, not just today, but for his chances of ever living past this at all, ever being free again? He'd thought about her dying, even about killing her in his most private childish fantasies, but now he wondered if it was a thing that could be done, or needed to be done. What are you thinking about, buddy? He swallowed twice. Why you can't leave me alone? Because I want to play. She leaned in close to his face, and I like playing with you the most. He shoved her backward, and she sat down hard on the edge of the curb. Her teeth clacked together, and she gave a little grunt of surprise. Wade was surprised too, and he was terrified. As she put her hand down in the rubbish gathered in the street's gutter, he broke into a run again, hoping against hope he might escape. He made it a few blocks down Yorktown Lane and was considering which alley to cut through when she nabbed him by his feet and flipped him as she ascended into the air again. This time he hit his head hard on the sidewalk before she hoisted him up and continued to rise. All the blood rushed to his brain as his arms dangled down past his ears. His shirt bunched up and obscured his vision, but not enough to hide that they were soaring up higher than they had ever been, even at the very top of the grand old tree. She was going to drop him for sure this time. As he felt his heartbeat hammering inside his upside-down head, he watched blood drip from where he'd struck the sidewalk. One drop landed in a woman's hairdo as she packed up her kids to leave St. Alister Park, far below. She paused to hold out one hand as if checking for rain. The wind started to get cold. It was warmer along the ground today, but winter owned the sky. You're going to be sorry for what you did, Wade, she shouted over the wind. I already am, he muttered, still dripping blood like a leaky cloud. Whether she heard him or not, she let go. There was a moment where he felt all his weight shift with release, but thought he might be floating. That illusion vanished as he rushed toward the ground in a tight spiral. Earth and sky blurred into one another as he rushed to his death. All the wind knocked out of him again as she struck him from the side before he could reach the ground. For a moment she held him like a baby, but then let him go and he tumbled along the grass ahead of her. She must have been skimming the ground when she released him, like she was bowling with him. She landed on her hands and knees over where he stopped rolling. Her hair, that had now all come loose, dangled in his face. He wanted to brush it away, but was afraid to move. He'd already dared far too much today as it was. Mackenzie giggled and kissed him on the end of his nose. After another pause, she licked his nose cold and wet. She'd done worse in the past, but the day wasn't over yet. He showed his teeth and groaned, but she stood up over him, laughing. "You are always such great fun, Wade Sedley. I want to be your friend forever." Her voice echoed, and he rolled slowly to his stomach. Wade could have sworn there had been many more people in this park a moment ago when he looked down from above, but all those folks appeared to have found somewhere else to go, leaving the two of them alone in it. She picked him up by his shirt and belt loop and hurled him through the air with another round of laughter. He braced himself for a hard landing and then slid over a sheet of ice. The temperature dropped quickly, and he raised his head to see he was on the far side of a frozen pond, with the park suddenly covered in snow. She walked out across the ice, now wearing red fur robes, with a hood pulled up around her face. How was this possible? How was any of it possible? He remembered her saying her parents saw what she wanted them to see. Maybe this was like that, but how would he be sitting on top of the pond unless this was real? Her inverted reflection wore red too. That image of her strolling under the ice was wavered, blurred, unreal. All of Wade's life was unreal since she became a part of it. The view above the ice wavered. Grass showed through the snow before the snow returned fully. Wade sat very still upon the ice. Then the ice cracked, and so did the insane smile across Mackenzie's lips. Her feet crashed through, and then she held onto the edge of the broken surface. She gasped, but then the sound locked off. Maybe the shock of the cold did that. She was thrashing. The snow really did waver in and out of existence then. Wade started to pull himself along the ice toward the closest bank behind him, away from her. Her throat unlocked. She screamed and cried as she struggled to pull herself free and failed. He hated her for being afraid after all she'd put him through. "Please help me." Her voice sounded so weak, breathy, and unlike her. He climbed to the top of the bank and saw the snow melting away in a shrinking circle, vanishing toward the pond. Maybe this was the end of her powers. "Wade, please help me." Mackenzie showed pure terror, and it scared him. If anything in the world could scare her this much, what chance did someone as powerless as him ever have? He had the power to let her drown and freeze, he supposed. Then what was he? What did he do with the rest of his life going forward, pretending he wasn't the kind of monster who could let something like that happen? He'd be hiding his whole life, only letting people see what he wanted them to see. She could just be a kid after all, just a kid with powers too great for her. He gritted his teeth and climbed back onto the ice along his belly. She reached for him with eyes wide, and he took her frigid hands. Pulling as best he could, he got her out of the water and coaxed her along on their stomachs toward the shore. The ice started cracking around them. Large chunks tipped upward and sank below the exposed water. "Wade, keep coming toward me. We're almost there." Wade kept going, and they made it. He then led her up the short slope away from the pond as the snow and ice vanished entirely. Her clothes returned to normal, and the temperature rose until he started sweating again. She hugged him tight, and he felt her tears on his neck, and then she let him go. With eyes cast down, she waved a hand, and all his aches and pains disappeared. He looked and saw his scrapes had gone as well. He touched his scalp carefully. It was a bit tender, but didn't really hurt anymore, and there was no blood. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." He turned his back and moved in the direction of home. Before he took very many steps, larger trees filled his view and blocked out any sign of the park or the street beyond. The air grew humid as vines twisted around the thick trunks. Undergrowth sprouted around their legs, and the sounds of jungle animals filled the air over an endless tone of singing insects. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Because we're true friends now. We love each other, and we're not done playing. I want to go home, Mackenzie, please. Please, she teased. I saved you. You saved me. She brought one wrist up to her forehead with her hand hanging limp beside her face. She fluttered her eyes like a swooning damsel in distress. My hero. I helped you. Let me go home right now. You can go home when we're done playing. The ground thundered and shook as something very large charged toward them through the trees. The leaves that made up the high canopy wavered back and forth with the motion of the approaching monster. She giggled and spoke close to his ear. If I were you, I'd start running. He did so, pushing branches and vines out of his way as he fled through this new jungle. Wade vowed to himself that if she ever found herself in trouble again, ever showed any vulnerability he could exploit, he wouldn't make the mistake of sparing her again. He'd learn to live with whatever came after.